it wouldn't let me unmute. It said like the host won't let you unmute. I was like, no, click it. Um, it's just gonna be one of those meetings, man. I'm telling you. I blame this on Jim for not being here to do his job. Jeez, Jim. Tell him, Marty. Tell him, Marty. All right. Well, my name is Adam. I'm an alcoholic. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. It's I will say this. I'm gonna go ahead and say it now. It is hard to follow Marty from last week. I'm just gonna go ahead and throw that out there. But it's always an honor to do this. I was talking with both Daff and Christy this week. I was like, how did I even get to this meeting? Like, I don't know. Like, I kept looking and trying to figure it out. And I went through like my messages and stuff like that. And Christy and I were friends probably like 3 or 4 months prior to like COVID starting. And I think Christy got here first, and then she's like, hey, come check this meeting out. And then once I was here, I think end of March, early April, whenever it was, I've pretty much been here ever since, and I try to catch it at least once, maybe twice a week if I can. Pop in, if I'm driving home or whatever, just because this has been such a stable, I don't know, like resource for me to use. I have fallen in love with Zoom meetings over this period of time. There's some people who absolutely hate them, but I love them because if it wasn't for all of this, I wouldn't be with you guys. I wouldn't have the relationships that I have with the people that's in this meeting, or the people of some of the other meetings that I attend, that I truly absolutely like. I get excited when I see their name pop up on my phone, like, hey, such and such sent you a message, such and such sent you a text message. So it's really cool. This has been a really great, wonderful experience, even through all of the pandemic and everything. Like, this has been such a stable community for me to be a part of. And I love it. I love the fact that like we can come on and we're all in different places, different time zones, and yet we all work on carrying the same message. And yeah, Daff mentioned about like big book stuff. I mean, like I had a really good sponsor who got me into the big book really early on, and we would read the book, and he asked me to highlight things that I could relate to. And I just remember like I was not interested in that. I was not interested in reading the big book at all. But anyway, I'll come back to that in a second. But last time I spoke, it was probably April or May of last year. Like I said, I mean, I've told my story. I couldn't tell you how many times, and so every time I tell it, it's always different. The stories, I mean, obviously the same, but like what I choose to cover is always different. Where I feel led to be, kind of leading in service. But my sobriety date is December 22nd, 2006. So I just picked up 14 years this past December. So thank you. I got sober at 23. Some people are thinking like, holy cow, like I just got started at 23, or like I've had people say like, well, how did you even know you were an alcoholic at 23? I knew. I would love to tell you that I wasn't, but I was. I mean, I I think when I was thinking back on last time when I spoke, I don't normally do that, but I spent a good bit of time, I guess, just because I was getting to know everybody in the group anyway, just kind of giving some backstory of who I was and stuff. But I don't plan to do it this time. But I mean, listen, I started using, I started smoking weed at 12. Hey, Jim. I started smoking weed at 12. I started ecstasy at 17. 18 was when I had my first drink. I drank Natty Light in a red Solo cup. And I remember they always ask me like these questions of like, people would always say like, hey, do you want to do such and such? And I was always like, no, I'm good. That's not my thing. I don't really do all that stuff. And then they would always ask me that question, are you sure? And the are you sure question was where they would get me, because I was so terrified, like you were going to think something was wrong, or like there was something wrong with me. And so as soon as you asked me, like if I was sure about something, like that's what I would always say. Absolutely. Of course I want to drink. Give me the drink, give me the pill, whatever it is, give it to me. And so I remember when I drank that drink, I didn't really care for the taste that much, but boy, did I like the effect. There's a line in, well, not a line, but it's a quote from Bill Wilson that he said, the moment I took that first drink, magic happened. Let me tell you what, the first time I ever read that quote, like I got it, like, because that is exactly what happened for me. Like the moment I took that first drink, magic happened for me. Because when I think about magic, I think about like, deception and illusion and disappearing acts. And let me tell you, my fears went away, my trauma went away, my pain went away, my memories went away. And then there was this illusion of I was taller, my shoulders were broader, I had I was funnier, smarter, I could take a punch better than you could take a punch, whatever else that you want to call it. But I just knew that that moment I was like, this is it, I'm in. And it progressed over this period of time where like I drank, I don't know, probably that first 6 months I drank, things got out of control really quickly. I mean, I was drinking probably by the end of the time, by the first 6 months, I was drinking probably 12 beers each time I was drinking. And drinking like, I went from like drinking on Friday and Saturday nights to now I'm starting to like drink throughout the week a little bit here and there. And I had an experience that happened, and I'm not going to go into it too much, but I had an experience where I ended up on New Year's Eve of 2001 when I was in college. And I cheated on my girlfriend with someone, and we both got intoxicated. Like we didn't, like nothing crazy, crazy happened, but I cheated nonetheless. Um, and it came out like a week later. Like, my girlfriend didn't know, but like a week later, it was like somebody said, "Well, I heard you took advantage of this girl, and that you were sober, you were just faking drinking, and so that you could take advantage of her." And I was like, "Well, hold on a second," and it that threw me for a loop. And I remember that night being at a party. I went across back to my apartment next door, and I hid under the desk because, like, I was like, "Dude, this is where did this what happened?" Like, I mean, I'm out drinking, I'm having a good time. I already got enough guilt and shame for cheating on my girlfriend. That was horrible in itself. And then now I'm getting accused of like basically assaulting this girl. And thank goodness the girl had heard what had happened, and she came back and was like, "That's not what happened. We were both drunk, and like it was, it just was stupid. It was a stupid choice." But I just was like, "I'm done. I'm not drinking anymore." I'm like, "I've had enough. Like that was too much for me. Like I'm not trying to get accused of being like assaulting a girl. Like I'm done." But I was still in that time frame taking other medications to help. I would go to the doctor and be like, "Hey, I stumped my toe," and he'd be like, "Oh, here's a 90-day prescription to such and such." And then I could go to another doctor around town and go to get something else. And so so it was always kind of something was in my system. And then about 6 months after that, after I stopped drinking, we were at a fraternity formal, like way out, like in the boonies at my buddy's parents' like lake house they had built, like out like Daphne's kind of in this area, like by Clanton. Um, yeah, Clanton, Alabama. That's all I need to tell you. Um, so anyway, so we hung out in that area, and it was. I just remember I was at a fraternity formal. Like, there's no cops around. There's like 4 miles, 3, 4 miles in between like houses and stuff like that. And like they were like, "Do you want us to get you something?" And I was like, "You know what? I'm out here at the fraternity formal. What's the worst that could happen?" And I had a date, and she drank and stuff like that. And so next thing you know, like I started drinking. Well, the worst thing that happens for me when I drink is that I drink, and then I don't stop. And I will stay up past you and keep drinking. I will drink to the point of throw up, and then drink more now that I've made more room. And that's just kind of the routine that I went on. I was in a fraternity, and like, listen, I love those guys. Like we had a couple of like little Zoom reunions over the break of COVID, and like I still can sit on there and just laugh my head off with those guys. I had some of my best times and best memories in college with those guys, and unfortunately a lot of those memories I don't remember. But it wasn't all bad, but it got progressively worse. I think back to like when I got sober, you have to think about this too. I mean, and this is interesting to think about, at least for me, it is like when I got sober, the hottest phone in the market was the Motorola Razor. Like the flip phone was the hottest phone in the market. So like Apple hadn't even come out with like the iPhone yet. And so like I used to like be terrified of some of the things that like I did that was on video, and like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe, like they have me like funneling beers in the library. I used to drink in the library like while I was studying. Like I would study for 30 minutes, and then I'd go to the top floor, and then I would funnel beers, and then I would come back downstairs and study more. And of course, like by an hour into it, I was just like, we'll see what happens. Um, I graduated surprisingly with a 2.2 GPA. That part was not surprising. Actually, it was kind of surprising that it was that high. But I had to work really hard for it the last little bit. I went back to school recently, back when I was 31, to become a therapist. And it's funny because when you have to like send to the school, you have to send your transcripts over like from your previous school, and you can see like just the decline in the grades like through the semesters, to where I was like C's and D's, like an F here and there. So anyway, so just drinking was the biggest part of my life. That's all I cared about. I didn't care whose it was. I didn't care if it was, if one of the girls from the sororities had come to the house and left it and like half drank. I didn't care. Like I was drinking whatever was left. I didn't have any, I guess, I don't know. I didn't have any problems with that. Like I'd pick up a cigarette butt off the ground and like light it and smoke it. I mean, I had no regard for like my own life and just kind of what I was doing. It was self-destruction. And I wasn't angry. I was angry at a lot of things. I was angry at my past. I was angry at my trauma. I mean, I've talked about it a little bit in here throughout I guess the year, but I mean, my parents were married until I was like 22. They divorced. They tried to get married, or they tried to get divorced at 15. And for whatever reason, like they went 6 months without, um, they went 6 months of like yelling, screaming, slamming doors, arguing. And then they decided to work it out the last day when they were signing the paperwork. So that part still irritates me. But I had a mom who was overly involved. In fact, too overly involved. Somebody who was very emotionally abusive. She just kind of figured that out because I told her in the last month, which has been an interesting conversation. But guilt trips, emotional blackmail, all that kind of stuff, and it just was really it was a lot, and my dad was never there. My dad was, vice president of a healthcare company. We would move every year and a half. And so I just I never knew how to kind of plant my feet. I knew how to be a chameleon. I knew how to do that. I knew how to blend in with the room of the people that I was around because of having to move all the time, and moving every year and a half to like a new state, completely new school. I went to 3 high schools in 4 years. I was thinking about that the other day, and I just never really had my deal. So I never really knew where I was, who I was, kind of like what I wanted to do. I tried to fit in different places, but um, yeah, but I just was angry, man. I had a dad that just wasn't there, and I had somebody who didn't teach me how to play baseball. He didn't teach me how to talk to girls. He didn't teach me about life and like all that stuff. I mean, he just didn't. He was gone 6 days a week. The one day he was home, he was usually jet lagged and slept. And then again, sometimes he'd be gone for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. So I really didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time with him and know him. And so my mom had an affair too, and that made a difference as well, being angry. So when I was drinking to blackout. I was drinking to get to any point of oblivion that I could get to. Um, so I graduated from college. I went to Columbus, Georgia, worked there for a year for my aunt and uncle, and that was really when just it hit the fan for me, because now I'm regularly in a routine level drinking by myself. To like I would be hungover on, I would go to Auburn on Friday nights, right? I would drive from Columbus to Auburn, which is funny because it was Columbus, Georgia is Eastern time, Auburn Central time. So I would leave work at 5 p.m. I would get to Auburn at 5 p.m. because it took about an hour to get there. But in Georgia, they had 40 ounces. So I would always come prepared with 40 ounces and obviously duct tape them to my hands because that's what any good college kid would do. I was basically Frank the Tank. I was the guy that was coming back after he'd already graduated and sleeping on the fraternity couch after college. And so I would go out all night, and my fraternity brothers would forget that like I was not home when they came in. And so 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning, like, the door's locked, and I would either sleep outside or I'd have to crawl through the window. And then I would sleep for an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever, get up, be pissed that I was there, be mad that I was there. And then I would just drive home to Columbus with a horrible hangover. And then I would be like, I'm never drinking again, or I'm just not going to drink tonight. And then I would wake up later in the afternoon and say, well, maybe a couple would be fine for the football game. And then I would drink again. But I was in this competition with myself. I can vividly remember like how many beers can I drink in an hour? How much of this, fifth can I finish in an hour? And so that just kind of became the routine. So I would wake up Sunday mornings with, bottles of various types all over the floor. And just, that was kind of where I got myself into. I was absolutely miserable. People could tell. And I tried to do the geographical change. I was like, I'm going to move to Birmingham. I lived here 1 year, my senior year. A lot of my friends were back in Birmingham. So maybe that'll fix it. Maybe the geographical cure will fix it. And, I really just made a really big fool out of myself the last night. Obviously, I'm not really gonna go into it and spend a lot of time into it, but I made a really big fool out of myself the last night. And anybody that had any little bit of respect for me left, like just they were done. So I reached out for help to a friend of mine that was I worked with. She was older, but I reached out to her and said, I just can't do this anymore. And so trip to the emergency room, all that good stuff. I go to bed that night. The next morning, I get a knock on my door. It's my uncle, and he's like, "Here's you got 5 minutes. Pack a bag. Let's go." And that's when he took me to. I was on the way to treatment, so I went from Columbus, Georgia, to Montgomery, which is like I don't know, hour and a half, maybe a little over hour and a half. And then my dad picked me up and took me from Montgomery to a little north of Birmingham, which is another hour and a half, hour and 45-minute drive to treatment. And I just remember like halfway there, I was like, this is a great idea. Like, I'm grateful for this. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. At that point, like, because of that, because of not eating, because I didn't eat when I was drinking, that was a waste, in my opinion. On top of other substances that I was using, I weighed 115 pounds when I went to treatment. I weigh about 170 now. So I mean, you can imagine like how wonderful I looked at that point. But I just, but I just remember thinking at the same time, well, maybe this was just a bad night. And I just remember saying to my dad, I was like, well, maybe last night was just a bad night. Let's just chalk it up as a bad night. He's like, son, you've had a bad decade. And he dropped me off at treatment. He's like, if you leave treatment, that's your business. He's like, but I'm not picking you up. And so anyway, it's funny to think about that experience because that was where everything really started for me. That was where really like I didn't want to be there. I was angry. I was angry that I was there. I was sick. I'm on some medications because they forced me to take those, and they're like, you have to because of seizures. But then there was other medications they were going to give me to help me with other withdrawals that I was experiencing, and I was just like, no, I'm tough. I can handle this. And of course, like I'm hot sweats, cold sweats, aches, chills, throw up, diarrhea, all the fun stuff that you go through. Um, and but I was just I didn't realize that was what it was going to be like. I never really experienced withdrawals before because I never was sober, like pretty much from like, especially 18 on. Really 18 on, I was never sober. I always had something in my system. So, but when I was there was a guy that came and spoke on Christmas Eve of 2006, and he just seemed like we just connected and we were completely different human beings. I told the story before. He was bald head and like, big, thick goatee. He kind of looked like Jim actually in a weird way. But he had like gargoyle tattoos on his forearms and stuff, and like he went hunting and, like that was not my thing. Like hunting was never really my thing. He liked Alabama. I liked Auburn. He likes NASCAR. I was like, I don't get why people like cars driving in a circle. That just makes no sense to me, but go for it. It's your business. He liked country. I liked metal. So we were completely opposites, but yet I understood exactly what he would talk about when he would share. Like when he spoke that night, like he said things that like you only know if you know because you've been there, and I remember like I had multiple suicide attempts. And in some ways I failed on those. One of them I kind of backed out at the last second, because I remember specifically like there was this one night where I swallowed a bottle of Ambien, like a full bottle, and a couple other things, and drank on top of it. And I went to go lay in my bed because I was like, well, this will be a neat way to do it, nice and clean way to do it. And I just remember thinking to myself, what if this is purgatory? What if like this is the day that I have to, because I do this act, right? Maybe this is what I have to complete, like for eternity. I have to live this day over and again for the rest of my life. And I remember like making myself, get sick and get it out of my system. So and thank goodness I did, right? Because like that, it opened the door for me to get to somewhere different. So I know I'm not the only person on here that's had that experience where, whether it was a purposeful fail of an attempt, or if it just, you woke up the next day, regardless, it didn't matter. It's like, we're here for a reason, and I believe that every one of us is here because we still have a purpose to complete, and I still believe I have a purpose. I still believe that I have that purpose. But I didn't ask that guy to sponsor me right then and there. I asked him a couple days later. We went to our first outside meeting, and he happened to be in the meeting, and I blocked the door basically from him, so he could not escape the room, which looked very creepy. I know. Now I know. At the time, it just seemed like the logical way to ask the guy to sponsor me. And so he goes, "Can I help you?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, Adam O." And he's like, Jimmy S. And, he just is like, "What's up?" And I go, "The steps." And I just pointed at the steps on the wall and I just went, and he was like, "Are you literally, is that how you just asked me to sponsor you?" And I was like, because I was 23, I was scared to death. And he goes, "Fine." He goes, "Will you take a suggestion?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Get out of the doorway." And so I got out of the doorway and we met, and that's where he gave me the book instructions to read the first 164 pages. And that's where I started to fall in love with the book. They gave me that book on Christmas Eve when I went up there to the guys in the cottage. And I remember thinking, like, I'd rather have socks than this book. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is like ridiculous. Like, this is a huge book. Why do I want this? And they're like, see if you can find yourself in there. And I started reading. And again, it takes a minute to read, Bill's story and doctor's opinion and all that stuff. I mean, it takes a minute to kind of read through that language. But all of a sudden, especially when I got to more about alcoholism, man, like I got it. Like that made so much sense to me. Like my book is consistently highlighted with highlighters, from like different times I've gone through and read and related to something, where Bill said in his story, quicksand stretched out in me in all directions. I had met my match, like the worst thing that you can do in quicksand is fight. And like, that's exactly what I would do when I was drinking and using. Here's all these people trying to help me. And I'm like, I got this. I can do this on my own. I don't need your help, I sank, and that's why I sank faster. And in some respect, I'm grateful, I guess, for that, right? I mean, like you take a defective character like stubbornness, if you tweak it just a little bit, now it becomes driven, and that becomes a positive. And so, like when I was drinking and using, I was stubborn, but when I got sober, I became driven. When I started to use it towards like a reconstruction of things, I started going through the steps with my sponsor, and I really started to fall in love again with the steps and fall in love with like what it was talking about. I didn't know if I wanted to be sober. I really didn't. I was 23. I was like, man, I still have plenty of time to go party and do things and have fun, but I'm going to try this for like 6 months and see what happens. And if I don't like what I get, then I'll go back to drinking and using it. It's not like it's going anywhere. It's been around since the beginning of mankind. So I'll just, maybe I'll go back to it if I decide I want to continue on. And I never left, because I started to find these things in the book where it says, on page 30, it says, we all learned that we had to play, or not that part. What am I talking about? Dad put me on a pedestal now and I'm going to screw it up. We all had to concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. Not that I admit it to everybody else, but I have to admit it to myself. Because again, like when we come into recovery, everybody comes in, right, with one of two actions. Either number one, either you're in here because of a ceasefire, or number two, you're in here because of a surrender. And ceasefires are fine. There's nothing wrong with a ceasefire, right? I mean, you can come in here initially as a ceasefire and stay as a surrender. But the reality is a ceasefire means that like, I'm here because like, I'm getting the trust back. I want the bank account to look better. Like I'm trying to save the relationship. I want to get my kids back. The court case until that's over with, until I get the new job, my health stuff goes away, whatever, blah, 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 add whatever you want. And then maybe I can go back and drink again. For me, like I finally had to like concede to my innermost self, like I'm an alcoholic and I'm among other things. And like, there is no way for me to drink and use successfully. I don't care if they come out with a banana pudding flavored margarita, it ain't going to work for me. It's at the end of the day, like I don't stop. Like I don't drink because I like the taste. I mean, I do in a lot of respects I did. Right. But like I drank because I like the effect. And eventually the effect stops because what it tells me in the second page of A Vision for You in chapter 11 is that like there comes a point in time where you can't imagine your life with the substance and you can't imagine your life without the substance. And the truth is that was me. I couldn't imagine my life continuing to drink and continuing to go down that road. But I also could imagine my life not going down that road and drinking. And so it says you'll be at a loneliness, you will know loneliness as few people do. And that was my experience. I knew loneliness as few people do. It even said you'll wish for the end. And 100% I did. Listen, the truth is that like if alcohol worked the same that it did in the beginning, I would still drink. That's just the truth. That's just the reality. Some people like, especially if you tell families that, they're like, I'm like, no, if it still worked the same way that it did in the beginning, I would still drink. But the point is that it stopped working. I I didn't get the relief anymore. In fact, all I did was I just kept a hangover from showing up sooner, and that was it. That's the only thing that happened. It didn't stop this. It didn't stop my pain. It didn't stop my memories. It didn't stop my trauma, because in fact, it actually made it worse. The more I drank, the longer I went drinking, the more my pain and my trauma like would show its head, because like alcohol would no longer be the solution for it. And so like I really had to learn that this was a surrender process, and I had to surrender. Like it doesn't matter like if it's 20 years from now, 10 years from now, if they come out with some kind of new favorite drink or whatever. Like I'm a huge wrestling fan. Like I can say that today. Like I'm fine. Back in the day I used to would never say because I didn't want people to know. I used to watch wrestling all the time, still do sometimes. But then like The Rock came out with tequila, and I'm like, first off, tequila is gross. Like that's the one drink that I would give away for free. Like I wouldn't drink it even if it was free. But back then I would have been like, man, The Rock came out with tequila. Oh, this is my favorite drink. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't work for me. So I really had to learn what that first step meant. That was one of the first steps. Like, and that's to me, that's the only step I have to work 100% perfect. I had to learn that like I have to work this program. I have to work these steps. And like that first step for me was true, because I had to admit that I was powerless. Not only the fact that once I start, I can't stop, but the second part to powerlessness, which most people forget, which is that I can't stop myself from starting. If I could, I would have done it. Trust me, I would have much rather done that than gone to rehab, or go to meetings and stuff like that, but like I can tell myself I'm not going to drink, but I can't follow through with not drinking. That's the problem, and my life did become unmanageable. Like, yes, I was able to still have a job when I went to treatment, but you know what? I had an apartment with no power. I would end up sleeping in my car most days, because like I would drive to go get things and I would not have enough gas to get back, because I didn't put gas in my car because I was cheapo. And so wherever my car ran out of gas, that's where I slept, you know, but unmanageability is so much more than just paying your bills and being able to stay and maintain a job. And unmanageability has to do with your emotions. Like I would be unmanageable when it came to my emotions. Like one minute I'm happy and everything's going great. The next minute I literally just lost my security deposit because I put my fist through a wall, you know? Eh, like one minute I would just like, my reactions were unmanageable. I was super impulsive. I would make decisions based off emotion, not logic. Like that's where my life became unmanageable in a lot of those ways. My health became unmanageable. I'm not eating. I weigh 115 pounds. I'm not getting good sleep. I'm getting blackout, pass out sleep. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, like hygiene, like, I mean, I still like to shower, but that was like usually like because I thought I was going to die, and I would just be laying in the shower, like curled up in a ball, looking like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. Um, but man, there were so much things about my life that was unmanageable. And I had to really truly understand that. And that first step was really important to me, because you look at it, doctor's opinion, Bill's story, there's a solution, more about alcoholism. 4 chapters are dedicated to step 1. Step 6 and 7, 2 paragraphs. That's how important step 1 is. 4 chapters to step 1. And so I really focused on that, man. I really spent a lot of time on that. Step 2, when I came to this idea of like this being restored to sanity, that there was a power, like I had this horrible issue, resentment with God, and it took me a long time to understand that there's a separation, there's a difference between spirituality and religion. And, my sponsor was like, why don't you come up with your own conception of God? And I'm like, you can't do that. And he goes, who told you that? Your mommy? Well, as a matter of fact, my mommy did tell me that. Thank you very much. Yeah. Like, I grew up in this uber religious household. Like if I held hands with a girl, I was going to hell. I mean, that's the household I lived in. I remember my mom found out like my sister like had sex like out of like marriage, and she was crying, like sobbing. What did I do? I thought I raised you guys better. Ah. So like when this guy that I'm working with and starting to build this relationship with is telling me that I can come up with my own conception of God, like that's completely foreign to me. That's different than what I was told my entire life. And he said, listen, he goes, it's your conception. He's like, you can't have a relationship with somebody else's concept. He's like, so come up with your own thing, whatever that is. And so I did the whole, the trick that a lot of us do when we first come in, put a line down a piece of paper, the left side's things I wanted in my higher power, the right side's things I didn't want in my higher power, qualities, characteristics. I recently found it when I was doing this with my patients like in the last couple months. It was funny when I did that list and I look back at it. the qualities that I want in my higher power are the qualities that I exhibit when I'm sober. The qualities that I didn't want in my higher power was the qualities that I exhibited when I was drinking. Because when I didn't want my higher power to be judgmental, lack of forgiving, grudge holding, doesn't listen. And those are, and a whole bunch of other things. And those are all the things that I was when I was drinking and using. So no wonder I didn't have a connection with a higher power when I got sober. Until I actually got into recovery. But it says in there to restore us to sanity, right? Step 2. Well, that's an implication that I'm insane, because I was insane. Because each time that I would drink, I would tell myself, well, I'm just going to have 2, or I would go pick up something. I'd say just a 20, and like, that was the thing. Or like, I'm just going to drink on Friday night, or I'll buy this 12 pack and I'll just drink 6, and then I'll have 6 for, later in the weekend if I decide to drink. And I would wake up Sunday mornings like in pure panic, because, the stores don't open till 12 to buy alcohol down here. So I'm like, well, I'm screwed, I'm about to get like, at that point I was already starting to get shaky hands and stuff like that. So I would have to drink NyQuil, like, just to kind of settle my nerves. And so anyway, so it just was this whole routine of like insanity. But I came to believe that there was something. It says in the book, it asked me clearly, this is like, he said, do you believe, or are you even willing to believe that there's a power greater than myself? And I was like, I mean, there's got to be something. I don't know what it is, but like, gravity's more powerful than me. A great white shark is more powerful than me. 5 lambda chis are definitely more powerful than me. My face showed that before. I took 2 of them. I definitely got 2 of them, but there's the 3 other ones that came behind them. So that's what happens when you're like, and you're angry and you're hurt all the time. You get really good at running your mouth. I got too good at running my mouth, unfortunately, and that was always kind of a detriment to me. But I just was like, okay, there's got to be something more powerful than me. Drugs and alcohol were definitely more powerful than me. So that's where I started with. And the 3rd step, I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him. And for me, the acronym for God that I use is good, orderly direction. And that's exactly what this program offered me, was good, orderly direction. Like, I decided that I was going to put my faith and trust into this program, not my sponsor, because my sponsor is a human being. He's fallible, right? I've had sponsors relapse over the years, but like, I'm going to put my faith in this program because these group of people are smiling and laughing, and they seem to be okay. And they seem to be content with things in life. And so that's what I did. But step 3 is only so much. This guy used to say this all the time in the meeting. He'd say, I have a riddle, which is always great when new guys came in. He would say, 3 frogs sitting on a log. One decides to jump off. How many are left? And of course, everybody's like, 2. And he was like, no. He's like, 3. Because one just made a decision. That's it. The one didn't do anything. He's like, and that's what a bunch of you, he's like, that's what a bunch of y'all do when you come into these programs. He's like, you come in here and you do 1, 2, and 3, and then you're out like you're in baseball. He's like, you make plenty of decisions, but you don't take any action. So step 4 was like where really I had to put some pen to paper. I really had to put down on paper, what my 4th step was. And for somebody who wasn't very resentful, because I was like, I remember telling my sponsor, I was like, man, I'm not really that resentful. And he's like, well, good luck with that there, champ. He's like, here's a notebook, here's a pen. I was like, well, what am I supposed to write? He's like, resentments. And I was like, what's the time period? He goes, as far back as you can remember. I was like, even before drinking? And he's like, yeah. He's like, because these are things that these are part of the things that have made you sick. So I went from being somebody who I didn't think was that resentful to 150 people later, multiple resentments at each person, myself, God, judges, attorneys. I was telling one of I do private practice stuff on Tuesdays and Wednesday nights. That's why I'm usually driving home on Tuesday, Wednesday nights if I jump in. And I was telling one of my adolescents, we were talking about a relationship thing that happened to him. And I said, man, I still remember this girl, and I'm still friends with her to this day, by the way. But her name, Christy Fuller, that was her maiden name. But she broke up with me in Mr. Wheeler's 6th grade pizza party. And she was a cheerleader. And I was like, dude, this is the most beautiful girl I'd ever dated in my entire life. She was like my, Wendy from, whatever that show was, Wonder Years. She was my Wendy from Wonder Years. And we dated for 2 days. I think we held hands once, I think. That was it. But it just was devastating to me. And like, you know what? She showed up on my fourth step. She broke my heart. I expected us to be married and stay together forever, but that didn't happen, you know? But I found I had so many resentments. And the big shocker of it all, I was the common denominator. And I found out that a lot of my resentments came because I have unrealistic expectations of me and unrealistic expectations of you. In fact, I have expectations of you that I don't even tell you what they are. So when you fail, I say, ha ha, I told you. I knew you were going to let me down. So like I found in that fourth step, like it was really kind of a punch in the stomach to realize that like, man, I was doing a lot of self-imposed misery. Now, understand there was definitely some things in my on my fourth step that like resentments that I deserved to have in the moment that I felt like I had deserved to have in the moment. But at the end of the day, I still had to let them go because they were keeping me sick. You know, there was things that happened to me that like should not happen to another human being. Like having a gun put to your head when you're 5 years old, like that shouldn't happen to a kid, you know, but these are the things that happen, you know? And so like I had a legit reason. Okay, I'm upset about this. I'm frustrated with this, blah, blah, blah. This is true. However, like I've got to hold, I can't hold on to this because at the end of the day, like my part is not what happens, like as the event happens and before the event, my part is how I react to it. So I learned a lot of things about myself in that four-step inventory and sharing it with my sponsor, specifically one that, you know, and I'll touch base on is about relationships. Because I think this is important for me to, this is one of the biggest things I learned from my four-step was that I wrote down this incident that happened to me in kindergarten. And again, I can say it today because it's pretty funny, right? But there was this girl in my class in kindergarten who pulled my pants down, all right? And I just happened to be wearing Spider-Man underwear that day, which was not cool in 1988. All right. Batman was like the thing that was the jam. Spider-Man was, I was basically, let's just go ahead and call it what it was. I was basically wearing like My Little Pony underwear on that day. That's just basically what I should just change it to because that's what happened. Basically, it was My Little Pony underwear basically that day. And I remember like, so I wrote it out, right? You know, Sally, what'd she do? She pulled my pants down, what it affected in me. And it affected literally everything in me except my pocketbook. It affected my personal relationships, my sex relationships, maybe again, not directly, but like it absolutely impacted my confidence, right? And like how I saw myself later in life. So it definitely affected it, right? My ambition, my desire to be helpful to her, right? Or my friends at that point, my self-esteem, my security, all those things were affected by that relationship, except my pocketbook. When I looked at that, like a wild card question that I put in my fourth step, is did I do anything to set the ball rolling? I looked over the information. I talked to a friend of mine who was actually there that day and saw it. And he said, no, man, you just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. She was going to do it to anybody. But then I had to ask myself, did I do anything to set the ball rolling? And then I said, okay, do I have a part in it? And my part was that like in life later, I became selfish, inconsiderate, dishonest, and inconsiderate. Why? Because what I found was that day, even at 5 years old, and it tells me in the book, right? It says some of us, the results were nil until we let go of these ideas, absolutely, right? Some of these things that I've been holding on to are ideas, and some ideas are really good, and some ideas that I have are really bad. For a long time, right, I had this idea that drugs and alcohol were a solution to my problem, and I lived accordingly because of that, right? Today, I don't believe that. I don't believe drugs and alcohol are a solution to my problem, right? I changed the idea, which changed the outcome. I didn't realize this, but that day at 5 years old, I developed the idea that all women try to embarrass me. So take a wild guess how I was in relationships the next 18 years of my life. Horrible. Like I did what I wanted to do. I said what I wanted to say. If you don't like it, there's the door and I'll find somebody else. Like you leave, they're breaking up with me. Great. Like I'll go to the bar, I'll find somebody else. Like I was purposely mean to women. Like, and again, never physical, but just mean, you know, and just an a-hole. And I didn't have to be that way, but I didn't realize like it stemmed from that one experience. So when I sat down with my sponsor from this fourth step and looked at it, I was like, wait, all women don't embarrass me. That's not true. Like there's plenty of women in my life that don't embarrass me. Like I've never purposely gone on my way. And all of a sudden, like it was like the heavens opened up and like I saw this idea for what it was. And that it was like, well, this is a wrong idea. This isn't true. This is false. And the most amazing thing happened is that now my reactions in life changed because now I learned how to treat a woman because of that, you know? And like, that was when I met my wife in recovery. Like I had 9 months, she had 3 months when she came back in, like she had been in recovery, 2 years on and off, 30 days, 60 days relapse, on and off relapse, but whatever. But she was the first one like I really like seriously dated when I was in recovery. And I learned how to be a completely different human being. Like I went into it like knowing that like there's a chance that she's going to hurt me in some capacity, but it's okay. It's worth the risk, right? And learning to be like more inconsiderate or more considerate, not inconsiderate, being more like selfless and like thinking about, okay, what would you like to do? Or thinking about how my behavior was going to affect her in a ripple effect, you know? And, you know, we just celebrated 12 years married. We've been together for 13 and a half, almost 14 years. And she'll pick up 14 years in May, May 29th, I believe. So, I mean, like, but it just, all of that happened because I looked at myself like in an honest way in that fourth step. And I can't tell you that it's comfortable. Like it's not. It's the steps are designed to be uncomfortable. In fact, it tells me that in the promises, right? It says painstaking meaning like you're about to get real uncomfortable. And I had a normie, you know, ask me like, what's it like doing a fifth step? And I was like, well, imagine me and you like, well, and I said, and obviously I used it somebody, I was like, but imagine like, you know, you meet somebody, right? And like, you know them for like, I don't know, a month and a half, right? And you're friends or whatever like that. And then imagine just standing there in front of your friend and just disrobing and just standing there completely naked. And she was like, huh? That sounds horrible. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of what a fifth step is. I mean, it's not comfortable because like I'm letting these people, this person, my sponsor, whom I built this relationship with, hopefully over this period of time by talking to them on a regular basis and spending time with them, going to meetings, all that stuff. Um, I let them see me in all my glory, I guess, right? Like the good, the bad, and the ugly. And he pointed things out to me that, like, you know, because I was like, well, look at this flaw, you know, and he was like, that's not a flaw. He's like, that's your perception. That's not a flaw. This is the flaw. And so he just pointed out these truths about me, and it was really helpful for me to learn that, you know. And so I started learning about defects of character in 6 and 7. And again, I can't just go like some people say, well, I'm going to practice being the opposite of my defects of character. Like, I mean, I could, that's temporary, maybe, you know, for me, but I need to find out what's the driving idea behind these defects of character. What's the idea that's driving that? Because like the idea is what drives the reaction. If you throw something at my face, my natural instinct is going to put my hand up to block it because I've had an experience that tells me like if something hits me in the face, it's going to hurt. And so I react accordingly. And so like when I have certain ideas in my life, you know, that's where these reactions come from that I have, like selfishness, inconsiderate, dishonesty, whatever. So I started learning through a lot of these things. I would listen to speaker tapes. I would do, you know, I would be traveling up and down the roads, listening to speaker tapes. I would start, I started sponsoring men. I started doing my amends process. You know, my sister, when I went to treatment, told me that she didn't trust me in an empty house. She was pregnant with my nephew at the time, her first kid. And she was like, you'll never lay eyes on him, you know, because you're just like, you know, look at you, you're a loser. Um, and you know, I mean, today, like I have, you know, two nephews and a niece, and my wife and I were the godparents to them, you know. And so like when, you know, when they've got something going on, which they do currently in their life, you know, like they reach out and talk to me about stuff like that today. Like I get to go see them. I haven't got to see them during COVID, um, which I'm planning on getting out there and going to see. But it's you know, I mean, I have a great relationship with her. Like the day that my nephew was born, she called me and she said, hey, I'm in labor, can you come up here? And I was like, I'm on the way right now. And I left like from where I was in Birmingham, drove to Nashville, and like I was there within like two and a half hours. And I got to see him when he was born. And I didn't hold him the first day. And it wasn't because like she wouldn't let me. It just was because I was so terrified because of like my past, like that I was gonna break him. Like I was so terrified that like I was such a piece of crap for my life because I was still living in like that guilt and shame. Like I was such a piece of crap that like if I touch him, it's gonna rub off on him. And I'm like, I'm not gonna do that to that kid. And so I just couldn't hold him like that first day, you know. And I was like, I got to get out of here. And I drove home as fast as I could. I drove to my home group meeting, and I was there. And so I talked to my sister before I left, and I said, can I come up next weekend? And she said yes. So I drove up the next Saturday and went up there, and it was, you know, got there early. I just remember like the fog. There was still fog, and you know, and going in the morning. And she said, well, we need to take showers. Can you hold him while we and feed him while we go take showers? And so I held him, and you know, he and I had a conversation with him, and I promised him a couple of things. And like obviously like he doesn't even know what I promised him, but I do. And I've been able to fulfill that promise, every day, like no matter what, I promised him as long as I was breathing, as long as I had a heartbeat, like I would do whatever I had to do to protect my recovery, and I've been able to do that up to this point, I still attend meetings, obviously like with you guys in Zoom. I still hit like two meetings, 3 meetings a week. I still call my sponsor on Mondays and Thursday mornings, and we chat on the way to work. And so if I need to call him for more, more than that, I'm down to do that. I still pray every single morning. That part is like, that's the key for me, is like, I can go days without going to meetings and it's fine. Like no big deal. I can go days without talking to my sponsor. It's fine. But when I lose that connection, I'm in trouble. Because the cell phone's great. We all love our cell phones, right? We all use our cell phones for a lot of wonderful things and connect with each other, and Instagram and email and MapQuest and temperatures and all that stuff, directions, whatever. But if I don't charge my phone is useless and it's a paperweight. And that's how my relationship is with my higher power. Like if I don't keep that relationship charged and I let it die, it's paperweight and it's useless. And I might as well not even keep it with me, because that connection's dead anyway. And that's the one thing that I've noticed, is like, anytime I talk to anybody that's relapsed and they come back in the rooms and I'm like, what happened? And they're like, I stopped going to meetings. I stopped talking to my sponsor. I stopped praying and meditating, and if you look at that, like that connection, right? Like spirituality, one of the definitions that I love is like, it's my relationship with me, my relationship with you, and my relationship with my higher power. And when I don't go to meetings, I don't talk to my sponsor, don't do like that inventory. And I don't do a 10-step inventory at night. I don't sit around and write every night. But like when I screw up, I know it. I don't have to like, when I put my foot in my mouth, like I get it. Trust me. Like I can see the foot in my mouth. Like I got it. Um, so I know when I'm wrong today, because of this practice. So I know how to fix it, right? And correct it and do the 10th step, right? And promptly, meaning without delay. And I have to have that connection with my higher power, and it's evolved and it's changed. And if you're struggling with that concept of a higher power, like I'll just say this, like I know less about my higher power today than I did when I got here 14 years ago, because I don't put a lot of stock in like knowing my higher power or what my higher power needs for me. Like I don't care about all that stuff. Like I just know that I need to be open to experience it. And that's what I've done, is like I try to remain open to the best of my ability to experience my higher power. Like I don't spend a lot of time in prayer, because again, what am I doing? I mean, I'm not, I don't know what I need. I don't even know what I want. I want, like I want Five Guys burgers and fries like right now. And then like, 30 minutes later, I'm like, what about like what I put the other day on Instagram, a hot dude Sunday. Damn you, autocorrect. It's a hot fudge sundae, but it said dude instead of fudge. I don't know why, but it did what it did. So I don't know what I want, and I don't even know what I need. I just say, like, help me to be loving, caring, kind, compassionate. Help me be better than I was the day before. Help me to see opportunities where I can have a better connection with you and with others. And I know that we started a couple minutes behind, but I'll kind of wrap up here. And by the way, like when we get done, like let's not do the whole like, let me tell you how wonderful you did. Let's not do that. Let's just don't do that. It's awkward for me anyway. And plus that just takes time away from you guys and your families and stuff. But, I went back to school. I became a therapist, which is great. And actually it's funny. I work at the treatment center that I went to. I've been there for 12 years. I've never been anywhere for 12 years in my entire life. It's funny to think now that I've been sober longer than I've drank, because I drank for 12 years, basically. I mean, I drank and used for 12 years. And I've been now sober for 14 years. And you know what? Nothing changes. Like, it's not like you get some secret code and they give you some medallion then now that like you're good. Like I still do the same things I did in the beginning. But like I'm able to help people today, like in my field, because of that, because I love being around the people that I love. And I love my patients, and it's cool to get the surveys that I get sometimes, and they're just, because they send them to corporate and stuff, and like they send me messages all the time. They're like, man, like you get consistently some of the most positive surveys of anyone in the company. There's over 500 people in the company, and it's just because it's usually consistency of like, man, like you can tell he loves what he does. Like you can tell like he cares about each single one of us. Like we're not just a person. Like we're like we're part of the family now. Like and it's true. I love those people because a therapist helped me, and so I'm able to help them. And I'll end on this. This last part is that I remember, so my father passed away Father's Day of 2015. He killed himself, unfortunately, but I'd put up a boundary with him, because he would come in my life and like he would show up and then he wouldn't come. He'd be gone for like 3 months, 6 months, and I never hear from him. And he was on the run for a while for things that he did or whatever. For some things because he became an alcoholic after me, which surprise, big shocker. Um, but I remember like he called my mom on like Thanksgiving one day. They were divorced or whatever, and he said, "Hey, I'm trying to get in touch with that. I'm like, did he get a new number?" And she's like, "Yeah." And she's like, so she called me. She's like, "Can I give it to him?" And I was like, "No." He doesn't. I've asked him consistently to like, "Hey, be a part of my life." I've given him some things to do. "Hey, call me once a week. That's all you got to do. And we'll just talk for 5 minutes. Let's build a relationship." And he couldn't do it. And I said, "Well, he has an email. He's got my email. It hasn't changed. Let him start there." And that was the last thing that yeah, so that yeah, it we never talked again. Um and so I remember getting that phone call that he had killed himself. And sometimes I still go back over and look at the police report and stuff. Um but part of it's just sadness and then part of it's anger. That's what I was talking about like with Marty last week, like with I love those guys, man. I love Marty and Jim, just because, I didn't have that male model, like role model in my life. And I so desperately wanted it. And I still to this day, like want it so bad, like I want to have that person that I can call and talk to and like about life and stuff. And I don't have it, those guys are as close as I can get to it. But I found out like a month later after my dad, well, no, take that, man, maybe a little after a month later, my wife was pregnant. And found out that we were going to have a little boy. And I mean, if you follow my Instagram page, I mean, you can kind of look back at my Instagram page and it's literally like he's all over it. I mean, like that's my ride or die, and he's like the coolest kid. He's my best friend. I mean, I love, like, we spend like constantly all this time together because I would rather spend more time with him than anybody else on the planet, just because of like our connection and what we do and how we get to, I mean, you guys saw him when he came in. Some of you guys were here last week when he jumped in and said, "Good job, Marty the goat." Because I mean, he hears me talking about you guys all the time. He hears me talking about, and he knows this is my family. This is a part of my extended family now. And so I mean, like, but he's never seen me drunk. He's never seen me high. Like he knows that I attend meetings and he doesn't understand why. Like, I mean, he's never really asked. But I'll tell him that, and I'm fine with that. To talk to him about that today. And he knows that this is what I need to do to be a part of like his life, because, one of my favorite pages in the book is on page 143. And it says, we all learned that we had to place recovery above everything, for without recovery, we would have lost both home and business. And I can tell you to this day, recovery is still the most important thing in my life. It's more important than my wife. It's more important than my son. It's more important than my job. It's more important than anything else on the planet. Because at the end of the day, if I don't stay sober, I don't have those things anyway. And so recovery is still a part of my life, just because I got sober and things got good and like, my bank account changed a little bit, and I can shower and, wear clean clothes and stuff like that. Like that doesn't mean that anything's different. Like I still have to show up and be a part of this program, and I'm grateful that like I get to do that, and I get to be the dad to him that I wished I would have gotten. And so like we get to like we took a nap together today, which was great. And we get to and again, trust me, he can push my buttons. Like he got some sass on him. All right, but nothing like a good throat punch couldn't fix. But we have a wonderful time. We have a great time, and I'm so grateful that I get to have like the experience of being a dad and being a husband today. So like I said, yeah, let's not do the whole like, "Oh my God, so wonderful when you said this." Like, don't worry about it. If you want to send me something privately, that's fine, cool. But like, yeah, we don't have to do the whole like, put me over kind of thing, because it's not important. So, but anyway, thank you guys for letting me share.